We should all, as red states, be competing to see the kind of awesome, great conservative policies we can pass that lift up those things that are good, right, true, and beautiful, and suppress and oppress those things that are dark, evil, and ugly. And as we see those as modeled across other red states, we should take those successful models and then implement them in our states. So I think red states in America have to be the models of these ideas. They have to advance the ball as much and as often and as far as possible, and then turn around and bring the rest of the red states along with them.
Revolution of common sense.
Revolution of common sense.
A revolution of common sense.
Truth was once common sense, but today, truth is uncommon. Explore biblical truths around faith, business, and politics with Peter Demas. Uncommon Sense in Current Times.
Hey folks, welcome to Uncommon Sense in Current Times. I'm excited to be here today with Luke Macias. He is a Texas-based political consultant, strategist, podcaster. He has advised and run campaigns for nearly 100 conservative candidates at every level of government. He is the founder of Macias Strategies. He is known for working exclusively on a full spectrum of conservatives who, in his words, walk the walk as well as talk it. I can't even say in his words. So, but he also hosts the Luke Macias show, where he analyzes Texas politics with a focus on advancing a strong conservative agenda. Today, there's a whole lot of conversation going about on the redistricting that's going on in Texas. There's been a whole lot of it has made national attention on the changes that's happening from it, and I listened to a podcast that Luke had on this, and it was very good to understand what's happening and what's going on from there. So I'm excited to talk to him about it. So Luke, thank you so much for being on the show. I appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thanks, Peter, for having me on. I really appreciate it.
So, give us just kind of a rundown, a little Cliff Notes version of what's happening for those that may not be aware of what's going on in Texas right now.
Yeah, in the spring, Texas is one of the few states in the nation that only legislates once every other year. Most states legislate, pass laws every single year. Texas does it every other year. And late in the spring, which would have been late in the regular session that we have, President Trump, what we now know is the Trump administration, started approaching different red states about redistricting mid-decade redistricting, expanding Republican representation in Congress. We'll explain the importance of that in just a second. But it was too late in the session to just bring this up in the final 30 days with the process. And so the governor at that point looked to put a plan together to actually put a special session on the call, which means the governor can call the legislature back for a special session of 30 days to address certain issues. And when he called them back, he not only asked them to address serious flood relief with the massive historic floods we had in Kerrville, but also a slew of Republican policies that were killed in the Texas House, as well as this mid-decade redistricting. Texas, more than any other red state, is positioned to add Republican seats with a redistricting effort. And so he asked the legislature to look at a mid-decade redistricting, which they did, and came up with a map that adds 5 more Republican congressional seats to the state of Texas in the upcoming cycle. And then what happened was that Democrats decided that since 100 representatives are required to have a quorum in the Texas House, and there are only 88 Republicans, that they would all get up and leave. And they fled. They fled
Right.
to states like Illinois, New York, and California to deny the legislature the ability to conduct business. And they've been doing that for the last week and a half or two. So Texas politics is now on the national stage. It's the trending conversation. And it has brought about a conversation about the impact that all of these, Democrats are having. What is redistricting? Why are Republicans considering to do this? So that's what has sparked this conversation. I will tell you that the polling bears out that this is not a popular move by Democrats. Less than 40% of the state supports their decision to deny quorum. And the vast majority of people are stepping up and saying they actually side with the state of Texas's right to determine its own boundaries for its congressional districts. And since they are majority Republican, they appreciate the state of Texas actually trying to increase Republican representation in the halls of Congress.
On one hand, I can a little appreciate the idea of, hey, we're just going to try to do whatever we can to kind of stop the other side. There's something about it that's kind of creative, et cetera. But eventually, that's just stupid. It's one thing to kind of stage a walkout for a day just to kind of make a point. But do they really think that's going to work? That's the question I don't understand. Is like at some point in time, you're either not doing your job or it's not going to work. Eventually, you're going to have to show up.
So the thought process they kind of they know historically it doesn't work. Many of these same Democrats walked out in 2021 when the state of Texas was passing election integrity legislation. By the way, the reason Democrats walked out is because they knew that legislation was going to threaten some illegitimate mechanisms they were using to pervert the election results. And I can share the facts with you here. We passed election integrity in 2021. What this stopped was ballot harvesting. It stopped somebody from showing up to somebody's house, knocking on their door. They don't know them. They get them to sign a little document, and then a ballot gets sent to that person's home. They show back up to the home, fill out the ballot for the person, and send it in. Okay? That was happening with hundreds of thousands of votes cast. And when the state of Texas came down on it, it meant that over the next 2 cycles, there were close to 300,000 to 400,000 Texans that really never intended to participate in an election, that stopped participating because these ballot harvesters wouldn't come harvest their votes. They were targeting these people who don't participate in elections. That's why they fled the state in 2021. Now, they eventually had to come back because you have to. And then we passed the legislation. And in fact, it passed even stronger than it started.
Right.
So Republicans took it up a notch and made sure to really fully secure it. And the same thing is being talked about now. You have Republicans in the legislature who were not sure they were going to pass the entire slew of 17 or 18 Republican conservative policy agenda items that are now saying when the Democrats come back, not only do they want to redistrict, they want to pass all of those Republican policies that are on the call. And they're even talking about redistricting other things in the legislative process. And so it could be the Democrats lose that ground. Ultimately, they've decided that the national attention they're getting, them screaming Republicans are racist and pointing the finger every single day in every single news outlet, will be to their benefit. I really think America has shifted on that conversation. They have stopped falling for the Republicans are racist line day in and day out. But I think Democrats are appeasing their base, and they're doing whatever they can to try to hold the power they have.
So, you bring up 2021 and what happened with election integrity, but in your podcast, you referenced it as you said Texas played it safe and they missed opportunities for the redistricting then. So what do you mean by they played it safe? And what is it now that makes it different?
Yeah, so I've always said that Democrats are far more comfortable using the power they have when they get elected. I think your ideal legislator, if you're trying to look for a model, it's the Democrat legislators that voted to advance Obamacare, even though they knew it was very unpopular and would probably lose them their election in their own districts. Because if you look back, you had a set of congressmen who really did believe that this policy was going to make the lives of Americans better. Now, you and I don't believe that. In fact, we know it's really destructive on our healthcare system, but those people did, and they voted, and they knew it was going to politically cost them when they voted, and they lost their seat in Congress. But Obamacare is still the law of the land today. So Democrats use the power they have when they get it. Republicans get it, and then they do everything they can primarily to not lose it. This is just, I think, generally how Republicans operate. They get it, and they go, well, if I do that thing, I might lose my power. And so they tend to tiptoe around the policies that they articulated on the campaign trail. This is a shift from President Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance. Of what they've done in the GOP, though, is they've said, if we have the ability to do it, why don't we look at doing it? You probably have heard these statistics, but for any of your listeners or viewers that haven't, states like New Jersey, New Hampshire, Connecticut, Rhode Island, these states have millions of Trump voters and yet not a single Republican congressman. If you take states like Illinois and New York, where President Trump actually gets 45% of the vote, Democrats represent over 85% of the congressional seats that come out of those states. Now, Texas is nothing like that. So we have a lot more votes, but what we ended up doing was we have just one or two districts that are under 60% Republican, and the rest of our Republican seats are stacked with Republican voters, 60+% Republican, which mean that we give Democrats 4 to 5 more seats than we need to if we spread it out throughout the state. And then what happens is, if your national congressional ballot, this is all your votes for Congress added up, if your national congressional ballot is Democrat plus 1 or 2, they can get a 45-seat majority. And if it's plus 2 Republican, we might get an 8-seat majority. Why? Because we've been much safer in the way we've redistricted, while Democrats have been much more aggressive. So we're leaving a lot of districts on the field, or off the field, really, if you think about it, where they're just automatically Democrat no matter how well we do in a cycle. So they played it safe in 2021. A lot of people just wanted to make sure their districts were Republican. And what President Trump has done is come in and say, you're going to still be in a Republican seat, but it's going to be less Republican. And there are going to be some additional districts here that are far more competitive than they would be now that we've spread out the Republican votes.
So last time that Texas did a mid-decade redistricting was in 2001, 2003. In 2003 is when it was.
That's right.
And it was years of litigation before it. And I know and I can't remember, there was a couple of them that got struck down due to, because you can't gerrymander based off of race, and a lot of times they look at the results of it from there. Is there a fear in Texas now that that's going to happen? Are they being really careful to ensure that what they're doing is they're doing it based off of political reasons as opposed to any other type of reasons that can be construed as racial?
That's a great question, and the answer is yes. So what has changed since 2003? I was 13 at the time when that redistricting happened. But what changed since 2003 is that the federal courts have said and stated very clearly, and this is actually a Galveston County case, so a Texas-based case. They redistricted the Galveston County Commissioner's Court, and that went up to the circuit court. And it was determined that you can, what they told the court something unique. They said, oh, we didn't do anything based on race. We just looked at party affiliation and made sure we had 3 Republican county commissioners, right? And so the court said, oh, well, you can do that, because you didn't gerrymander based on race. And so in the Texas House layout, the leadership, Cody Vasut and Todd Hunter, were very clear. They told the Democrats, I know y'all keep acting like we're playing games, but let us be clear. We have drawn these districts for one purpose and one purpose only: to get our state more Republican congressmen. We've looked at party affiliation, and we believe that there are more Republican seats can be had, and there are 5 more, and these are what they are. Now, they then gave people the racial breakdown of the districts and said, hey, many of these new Republican seats are actually predominantly Hispanic seats. So that just goes to show how many inroads we've made with Hispanic voters. But they made it very clear. We didn't draw them based on that. We drew them based on the fact that we were trying to give Texas more Republican representation in Congress. So I do think that they've dotted their I's and they've crossed their T's, and the way they've articulated and the motivations they've explained behind the drawing of the maps, that should make sure that these maps stand up in court.
Real quick, I just, we're going to kind of shift the topics here, and I want to thank everybody for watching and listening to this, wherever you are, to hit the follow and subscribe button. If you like what we're talking about or more, invite friends to talk about it. Encourage you to also go and see Luke's podcast as well. He's very thoughtful in how he presents ideas, especially with what is going on in Texas. But I think it's important for those that live outside of Texas as well, because these are issues that are occurring everywhere. Haven't you noticed that low energy, brain fog, or just feeling a step slower might be creeping in after sitting for a while? It could be linked to your circulation. Blood Flow 7 by Juvenon is designed to support healthy nitric oxide levels, which help your blood vessels relax and open up. It improves your oxygen and nutrient delivery to your brain, heart, and muscles. That means better stamina, mental clarity, and overall vitality without caffeine or stimulants. It's made with clinically studied natural ingredients, and in research, these have been shown to boost nitric oxide by as much as 230% in just 3 hours, and it helps open arteries for smoother blood flow. 2 easy capsules a day. No mess, no fuss, and you're supporting heart health, healthy blood pressure, and more energy to power through. So check it out at bloodflow7.com/uncommon or click the link in the description. That's bloodflow7.com/uncommon. It is common sense. And Luke, I want to kind of raise your attention to it because we're obviously it's not only seeing a potential backlash in Texas, but Governor Newsom, one of my favorites. Actually, truthfully, I pray for Governor Newsom that he has a supernatural encounter with God because I can't imagine what type of change that'll be. But until that happens, he's not one of my favorites. But he is threatening to push back on it in the state of California by doing something similar. Is there a fear within by doing so that we're going to see this in places like New York, Illinois, California, et cetera?
That's a great question. So first of all, to your comment about praying for Governor Newsom, one of the things I appreciate about the Lutheran liturgy in our Sunday service is that during our prayers for the people, traditionally, historically, the church has always raised up those leaders who were elected among us. And so on a Sunday, we'll pray for Governor Abbott, we'll pray for Senator Cornyn or Senator Cruz, and we'll even pray for Mayor Ortiz Jones, who's a very far left, really socialist Marxist mayor here in San Antonio, where I live. And so it's important that we remember that we get the honor of praying for these people, that they would know that they serve underneath the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, that the Lord would surround them with advisors and people who would reveal to them the truth of who God is and how he would have them enact justice in the land. So I think that's always a good reminder to all of us. Your question was about the backlash with these blue states. And I will say, in fact, J.D. Vance just answered this question on Sunday on Fox News. He said, Democrats can complain all they want, but ultimately they have already been aggressive in their redistricting. So Democrats are actually running the risk, if they try to add 4 or 5 more Democrat seats in California, they will actually, in order to do that, have to necessarily create more potential problems for them with current blue districts that are safe. So they are going to create some potentially more competitive seats, but in so doing, they're going to have to jeopardize potentially their own majority. This is how a representative republic should work, by the way. States can compete with each other. The reality is Texas didn't initiate this war. This was initiated by super aggressive gerrymandering done by Illinois, California, New York, New Jersey, Rhode Island, Connecticut. Name it, they've done it. While the red states, for the most part, have been much more fearful of actually drawing aggressive maps. The state of Florida is looking at redistricting, and the only amount they can add is one map. They can add one congressional seat because they already were aggressive in their last round of redistricting. And so I think that to act like California can just counter Texas is really silly. They've already gerrymandered so aggressively. So that's why I'm not worried, and that's why President Trump and J.D. Vance are going to the red states, because they're saying, if you look, the areas where there's low-hanging fruit are in red states, not blue states. I think that's important for Republicans to remember.
I can't believe you think something is happening in California silly. I mean, I thought they were always like just logical and, and objective. But gerrymandering throughout history, and oddly, that it's named after a governor named Jerry, where it came out. But it happened. It started in Massachusetts in the early 1800s. When that happened, they campaigned so hard against it that it actually flipped that party to a Federalist party. That party stayed in power until the party went out. I mean, it nationwide went under. Is again this fear, because not just in gerrymandering itself, but this idea that Republicans need to be a lot more aggressive when they have power. Isn't there a fear that by doing so, it's going to create more opportunities for pushback that we can lose later on?
Yeah, I think that was a lot of the old mindset for Republicans. And I always think about what Ron DeSantis in the state of Florida would be like if he had had that mindset, right? He won by less than 1% in a state that for all of my lifetime had been a swing state, right? You could have a Republican or a Democrat senator, right, or a governor or an ag commissioner or a comptroller or lieutenant governor. Every election was a coin flip. And Governor DeSantis gets it and has an opportunity to make kind of two paths. One was, you know what? We don't want to get too aggressive. We don't want to actually use the power that the people have given us to legislate and enact our agenda. Instead, I could take this safer option and avoid the potential backlash, as you say. And so if DeSantis had picked that path, I truly believe that Florida would remain today a toss-up state. But instead he said, I'm going to boldly legislate and govern according to the principles that I told the people I believed when I ran, and that we will let them decide, come what may. What ultimately happened was that he and President Trump, in both of their more bold, direct approaches, converted a significant amount of the Hispanic population that had not moved. Also happened in Texas. But then also what they did was they became a rallying cry. And we've seen this political migration that has happened, where leftists in Florida said, wow, Republicans here are actually serious about what they're doing. I'm going to move to Colorado. And then patriots in California and New York said, I'd actually like to live somewhere where my family can be free. And this state is giving me an example, this state of Texas and Florida. And so they pick up their families and they move. Mass political migration is happening like we've never seen it before, to the tune of millions of people on a regular routine basis between one election and the next. So I think that the point that Texas and Florida needs to remember is that your willingness to say, we really are here to fight and enact our agenda, as long as the people would have us, will actually attract more people to your cause. And so if Republicans can keep that up, I do think that they will continue to see the wins that they're seeing today.
You know, I think that's true just throughout history. I think we want to hear a voice as people. We want to hear our leaders speak, even if I disagree with them. At least I want to at least know where they stand. I want to know why I disagree with them. And sadly, that we've not had that for a while. I think, and that is the one thing. Whether I don't always agree with everything Trump says and does, but at least I can appreciate him for saying it and attempting to do it. And if I agreed with everything everybody says or does, then I would be I wouldn't be me. But so going forward, though, seeing something like this and seeing these changes that are going to be made, I think, you know, Abbott's even suggested moving from 5 to 7. Is there a fear that there could be political overreach?
There should always be a fear of potential political overreach. I think that there is probably room for 1 or 2 more seats within our maps that don't actually expose us. I'm telling you, there are still Republican congressmen with this map where we've added 5 seats that are sitting on over 75% Republican votes. Do you understand that? I mean, yeah. They're literally 75 to 80% of their district is still voting Republican. So there is plenty of room to still potentially move things around a little bit without overreaching, without risking the districts that you do have. So we'll have to see if the governor does decide to add 1 or 2 more congressional seats to that. Could you overreach at some point? Yes. The Democrats have been very aggressive and they have yet to overreach. Let's just be clear. The Democrats have not overreached. Otherwise, they would be losing those seats. They are winning those seats. They are representing 87% of a state congressionally that only voted 53 or 54% for Kamala Harris, right? That, I don't think by definition they've overreached. I think they've reached enough to gain what they actually set out to gain, which is more influence and powers in the halls of Congress for a blue state. And so the question is, for a state like Texas, how do you make sure to use the authority you have to gain as much influence in Congress, which should be gained so that states like California, New York, and Illinois don't get to pick who runs Congress every year? We're giving them a larger say than they should have. And red states are finally saying, I think we need to fight fire with fire.
With obviously the census, the next census that comes out, I mean, we've seen so many. I'm in Tennessee, and we joke all the time in Tennessee. We're going to put up a wall around California. It's not Mexico we're worried about. We're worried about California continuing to come here. And there's so much migration that has come here. I know the same thing as you were saying earlier. There's just the migration, people going to Florida. I know Texas has gotten hit very large with that as well. So what is the purpose, I guess, even if they make these changes now, thinking that all this time and effort and energy might just kind of go away after the next census, and all of it kind of is going to be changed anyway with the change of population that's been happening since 2020. Is there a concern that there's just a whole lot of effort that's just going to go away? And I know in history there's been a couple of those times where that's happened.
Yeah, so I think it's important to kind of recognize why the mid-decade redistricting is important, separate from the census and then another round of redistricting that will happen in 2031. So the mid-cycle redistricting is being done because in the event that we hand over the power to the Democrats in the halls of Congress, we hand over Congress to the Democrats, we are going to look at basically a stymied, stalled out last 2 years of President Trump's administration. So if you're somebody who says the kind of news I'm getting out of the things they're pushing are things I'd like to continue to see, and I don't want Congress to be able to step in front of them on a daily basis, then these redistricting is needed right now, because there's only one more cycle that will matter for the Trump administration. Now, what is going to happen through the next census, there's two important things to remember. One is, to your point, the political migration that's happening that will take even more population away from these blue states. It is also taking conservatives away from those blue states. We've studied the Californians that have come to Texas, and I will say, if the ones that are coming to Tennessee are anything like the ones coming to Texas, I hope you do build a wall around your state and they come to our state, because they're about 65% Republican. Right? 65% Republican, 35% Democrat. They actually ideologically are more like 70% conservative, 30% liberal. And truthfully, our state's only a 12, 14-point Republican state. So if we can import Californians at a 30-point Republican margin, I'll do that every single day and twice on Sundays. So I like the political migration that's occurring. There's two factors. One is that migration is going to potentially give Texas another 1, 2, or 3 seats, and Tennessee another congressional seat, and Florida another 1 or 2 congressional seats. But the other thing is that Trump is actually going to stop counting illegals in the census. This is really important to understand.
Yes.
Illegals congregate in blue states because blue states give them more free stuff, which is, by the way, why every red state should cut off every taxpayer-funded benefit to illegals, is so that they go to other states and live off of their welfare system. But blue states get to count those illegals, and then those illegals get to essentially steal a congressional seat from either Tennessee, Texas, or Florida for California. So California can have an entire congressional seat that it gets to draw as blue as it wants to draw, that's based solely on the amount of illegals in their state. So when the Trump administration changes that and stops counting the illegals, then the next presidency is going to oversee the final implementation of that census. And if it is J.D. Vance, which it's likely to be, against a Democrat, if he wins, then we will ensure that the census that is brought to the states actually correctly counts what our citizenry is. And that is going to give Republicans even more congressional seats. So I think doing it now and then doing it again should only benefit Republicans more.
What is your thoughts about what Arizona has done, though, in order to prevent people from being aggressive by having an independent commission to look at it? What is your thoughts on that moving forward?
Yeah, so I'd have to look at specifically how Arizona has done it, but I will say that, remember, California has an independent commission. And that's actually one of the things that Newsom's having to bypass, right? So Newsom is having to bypass their independent commission. So they're going to have to draw maps, and then they're going to have a congressional, a vote of the people to pass the new maps, because they've already passed these independent commissions. Many blue states have independent commissions. So here's what we've seen, largely speaking. I'm not going to speak to Arizona specifically because I haven't looked at their map specifically, but I'll say this. Independent commissions, should be pushed by every single Democrat across the country because they benefit Democrats heavily. They don't act independently. They always have like 3 Democrats, 3 Republicans, and 3 independents. And lo and behold, the maps that come out do not accurately reflect the population's voting trends. And so you still have these states that might have 45 or 40% of the state that votes Republican, but only 20% of the state is represented by a Republican in Congress. Why? Because the independent commission favors Democrats as much as Democrats favor Democrats. So my overarching perspective is that we should recognize that, yes, politicians will act politically. People will try to discern if a party is abusive of their power. And if they do abuse that power, they lose the trust of the people. That's a good thing. But I don't think we should say, oh, these decisions of governing are going to be given to somebody who doesn't have a political opinion. No, they all have political opinions. We know that.
Right.
And so the independent commissions are going to do the same thing, but it'll be shrouded in this view of independence versus just saying, we're Republicans, these are the maps we've drawn, and if you support them, then continue to support us. And if you don't support them and you think we've abused our power, you can also elect the other party. But what I don't think we've seen is when the Democrats have abused that and given themselves 85 to 90% of the representation, people don't kick them out of office. And I don't think we've seen that in the red states either. So
Right.
I think gerrymandering as a whole is not something that is incredibly offensive to citizens. People are offended when it is wielded against them to the benefit of the other party.
So, is there anything else that you think, and particularly again for those who are living outside of Texas, that you think that people need to know that they can look at Texas and be like, okay, we need to start looking at this and how to do it, regardless of whether they live in a red state or a blue state. What advice would you give people out there or politicians out there that are working for these state governments?
So if you're a politician that lives in a red state, I just welcome you to the competition. We should all, as red states, be competing to see the kind of awesome, great, conservative policies we can pass that lift up those things that are good, right, true, and beautiful, and suppress and oppress those things that are dark, evil, and ugly. And as we see those as modeled across other red states, we should take those successful models and then implement them in our state. So I think red states in America have to be the models of these ideas. They have to advance the ball as much and as often and as far as possible, and then turn around and bring the rest of the red states along with them. So I hope that people, as they look at these changes that are happening, or this nationwide discussion that's happening over a red state in particular, and now hopefully multiple red states that are about to take aggressive, important steps towards preserving the things we believe in, that they'll say, hey, I like seeing Republicans actually fight the Democrats and unite as Republicans behind an agenda that matters for our citizens. And so that's what I would hope that we can all kind of view as a country and as individual states as we look at this issue.
Well, I agree. I think that's good. Now, for people to find out more about you or to find your podcast, where do they go? How do they find you?
Yeah, especially if they're in Texas, because a lot of what I do is in Texas. I really don't talk about the country that much. But if you want to follow Texas specifically, Luke Macias TX is my X handle. And then I'm also have the show on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, on YouTube, anywhere you get your podcast, Luke Macias Show. It's a very original title. But no, I appreciate the time that you've had me on and the time to have this discussion.
Well, I appreciate it. And again, thank you so much, because you know so much more about it than I do. And I'm certain so many other people out there. So I appreciate your insight and educating us on what's happening. So thank you again. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Peter.